if you can get the blooms and the feral spirits and things like that. But it's also about managing your overload very effectively. This is one of the hardest things to get right in this matchup, is the realization that if you overload yourself and they follow up with Celestial Alignment, you're going to have a completely dead turn. So you need to be very, very careful about managing that balance between aggression, not just passing every turn so that they can happily march through to their win condition, but also managing that overload so you don't give them a free turn after Celestial Alignment.
Right, and we seem to have been having, at least recently, a tradition of the players that bring this druid, at least when we see it on stream, they just get there. They just like alignment on curve every time. It's kind of weird. But I think the big thing is, Sol loves to point this out, of course, that if you one overload into the alignment, that's so good for the druid player Radu in this instance. And also just the fact that for Viper, if he gets alignment and he isn't already ahead or very ahead, like, the Brakan just won't be a factor if he doesn't already have it, right? Like, it's just long gone, because not only does the quest, or will the quest take that little bit longer to activate, but Brakan doesn't get reduced to 1. So you've got to also wait 5 turns or 4 turns, 3 turns, whatever, to even play it. Then you have to be able to benefit. So I think if RDU gets hold of some ramp here, nice and early, gets the alignment out with at least some form of plan, excuse me, after the alignment, then he's going to be in great shape.
I mean, he's got an insane hand here. It's got to be said. Like, the fact that Viper is very likely to play Feral Spirits on 3 and then will just be met with alignment on the next turn, right? With Coin, Vape, Bloom into the alignment. Still works, obviously, with Coin Overgrowth. I think Viper most likely is going to walk face first into this one. And it's correct from his position to do so. You obviously can't anticipate your opponent is going to be able to go for the turn 3 Celestial Alignment. But it's possible here with the follow-up of Malygos.
Right, that's it, yeah. The one thing I do wonder is if RDU can actually take it a little bit slower and not bloom until he's played Celestial, because that's a bit of an issue. Like, when you bloom into Celestial, then you want to do something afterwards. You can't because you were overloaded in that instance. But overall, like I said, the hands just get there with Druid. It's so weird that it seems to happen all the time, at least in Europe. That if and you even saw RDU just hold on to the Celestial in the mulligan. He's like, yeah, I know what the plan is. I'll trust the rest of the deck to get there. And at least so far, he hasn't had, those dead draws where, for example, he got Celestial mulligan, then like Gadget Zan and something awkward, right? There's Anacondra. So with Anacondra, Daruk, I'm more okay with this.
This is disgusting. Like, the fact that Viper's overloaded, of course, means that he has to pass the turn here, even with an overdraft in hand. Doesn't matter. You can't unlock the crystals if you have none to spend. RDU passes the turn back, and then he wins the game. Anacondra Fungal Fortune Spellweaver will just delete Viper.
Yeah, it feels very unfair, and that's the payoff, right? Just nothing for Viper to do, which negates RDU not being able to do anything with that Bloom, and the Anacondra, Fungal, Malygos, whatever, take your pick. It's going to get very silly very quickly. But to be fair to Viper, he is being quite aggressive himself, even on limited mana.
Oh, you know what I'm really looking forward to here? APAC players just don't do Salt in quite the same way, because Viper is just being absolutely blasted this game. This is so unfair. This is the best possible hand you can get. He knows it. RDU knows it.
Look,
and God, I've missed that Salt.
If you're going to react like this, Viper, one, by all means, but don't take half a drink before the turn's over, because he spat some of that out when he saw the Malygos follow up. So that's just, I'm just trying to keep everyone, not choking on some water. But look at that. I mean, I think this is almost certainly going to be a concede here from Viper once he sees the end result of this turn as it gets progressively worse.
Like, low-key, it almost feels like this could be lethal on this turn. If you hit another Nourish and the Celestial Alignment, like, this could just be lethal.
I think as Soto would say, if the player was good enough, or maybe it's an animation time limitation, but this is lethal, right? Like,
it's mega lethal.
I'm not even talking about Viper conceding. This hand should be lethal in almost every circumstance, but of course it's more likely the secondary version of lethal, which is do a turn so powerful your opponent doesn't want to play the game anymore.
This is turn Oh no, it's not turn 4, sorry, it's turn 5. Okay, so quite balanced
that's
actually
fine,
when
then.
you think about it. Perfectly reasonable.
Yeah,
This is coming
that's
down
average,
the turn
right?
5.
From what I've heard. And there you go.
Oi, oi, oi. I mean, I thought I knew how to play Druid coming from APAC, but I am learning something new here over in the European region.
Yeah, I mean, very true, but this is a different style, Derek. Over here in Europe, we just Celestial everyone on curve, into Anacondra, into every single card possible. And like I said, every time on stream this happens, it is very weird. But RDU, of course, going to take that victory with, probably the easiest game of Hearthstone he's going to play today.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty happy to say. I think I'm pretty confident in that statement, Derek.
Yeah, biggest non-game I've ever seen. I mean, the crowning moment was when I think RDU dribbled water on himself as his victory cam there, which is absolutely hilarious and peak RDU, I have to say. But yeah, right, okay. Druid's out of the way. We can hopefully start with an actual game here of Rogue against Mage, a matchup that, again, it's two combo decks going up against each other, so it's not back and forth in the traditional sense of minions in Hearthstone. But I think there's still a lot going on. The constant counterplay that you have versus Mage is obviously to not play minions, so they can't complete their quest. But it's pretty difficult for Garrote Rogue to do that, actually, while still progressing their win condition.
Right, literally minutes before broadcast, I was finishing a game of Hearthstone against Crane, and it was this matchup. I was Mage, he was Rogue.
Oh, wow.
And I beat the Garrotes. I got all the way to the end of the game. He was about to fatigue and stuff, and he just pulled a fireball and a nitro boost poison out of nowhere and killed me. And I was like, come on. And like, the more I've played the matchup, because I've been just testing how good Mage is in this meta game, because I do think it's put itself in a very good position, which is why we see a lot of bans so far, at least in Europe, of Mage. I actually quite like it when you have the ability to just throw a fireball at Rogue's face if you've got that wiggle room, in the early game, right? And just try and be a little bit more aggressive, because I found that if you're super defensive, you just hand the Rogue player all of the time they need. Whereas if you try and lower them down, put them to about 20, they start having to play, a little bit more fast and loose, I guess, to try and get to that combo. But Rogue can definitely beat Mage in this race, pretty easily, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think the average turn that I've seen, or the most common lethal turn, is turn 7. Turn 8 is a little bit slow for the Rogue. Turn 7 is really where you're trying to hit. If you just miss on the field contacts, as we saw from Tice in the previous series, that's not going to happen, obviously. You just don't get to play Hearthstone at that point. But the main game plan is obviously to go for this super aggro draw game plan. You're not trying to swarm the board most of the time against Mage, because I think you're not quite putting enough disruption online to be able to surpass all their removal. And if you're not overwhelming them with minions, you're kind of just feeding into their game plan, because then they can play their First Flame, Brain Freeze, flurries as well to be able to progress the quest. So card draw, hand discounting as well is, in my opinion, the name of the game for RDU in these early turns.
And not a bad opening at all from RDU. Has the Octo, will be looking for field contact, of course, but he has Prep Secret Passage to go fishing on, whatever relevant turn that will be. So he does have a way to kind of just cycle through the deck. Starts off with Prep and Swindle off the top. That's how you want to start the game, right? Get some card draw going.
Oh, if you can go into Shroud of Concealment as well. Yeah, this is the nuts. I mean, it's exactly what I was laying out, right? It's drawing cards, progressing your win condition without having to play minions. It's the dream in this matchup as Swindle into Shroud, into probably Secret Passage on turn 4, and then carry on from there. Makes it difficult for Viper to keep up. He obviously has most of the cards he needs to complete the first layer of quest. Arcane is only ever a couple cards away, given the huge amount of redundancy in the deck. But whether or not he can get Varden online by turn 6 or 7 is, I think, a much steeper question to be asked.
Pretty rough. Fire Cell going to be shuffled away. Another Fire Spell as well. He's just missing the Arcane now, right?
Yeah, really does want to find Flow, Runed Orb, Studies as well. There's a lot of good proactive Arcane spells he can get.
And this is probably going to sound very stupid, like a lot of things I say. I felt like the more I played this matchup, that flow is super important because of what you mentioned, right? Rogue does its quest roughly, its game plan, its
Well, more or
combo,
less.
whatever. Yeah, on around that turn 7, without flow, you're not realistically getting there with playing Dawn Grasp and having the card draw and having burn, right, by turn 7. It's unlikely. So the flows feel even extra important in a quick matchup like this. Viper just cycling again, gets Arcane but can't play it because the Neophyte. Very limiting turn here. The only bonus is I would be surprised if RDU didn't attack with these minions next turn, proccing the barrier, or do you think it's possible to just never proc it?
I think he might honestly just never attack. You, again, you only need 2 spell damage buffs with Orc Merchant to get up to 32 damage with the full combo. And while he very possibly will get more than 8 damage through this game, is it worth the potential of giving them a second ice barrier to be played?
Right.
It's very difficult to read because obviously if you have minions on board, they're likely to be able to progress this frost part, the frost part of their quest anyway. But if he had an ice barrier or a flurry, it probably would have come down on this turn when he just floated 3 mana essentially by pinging face. And so maybe for RDU, it does start to become worth attacking again because they're going to be completing their quest anyway. Kind of tough.
He's going to get that big reduction down. Another Neophyte looks like the choice, and he's just going to push through here and proc the barrier.
Fair enough. I think it's honestly very close as to whether or not you're supposed to attack there.
It's tricky as well because now the one... This will be interesting, right? I imagine he holds the Shadow Step. Sounds completely reasonable. But the one Neophyte makes Fire Sale still playable this turn, which would then...
You mean the Fire Sale that he's traded twice up until this point in this game, and now wishes that he has above all else. It's
tricky though, right? Because it looks really bad in that instance. Oh, Viper traded Fire Sale, now he needs it, but he didn't need it, and it's not like he was like RDU was guaranteed to go wide on board this turn, right? So it's really tricky to judge because if he doesn't get his quest procced and cooking, then he just won't win, right? He won't have time to just go Fireball ping, Fireball ignite,
what to do?
Ping. You know, like that won't be fast enough. So it's painful to see Viper without the Fire Sale now, but the shuffle was required.
I mean, I think in all honesty, Viper was in the same headspace that I was coming into this, where the standard pan out is you don't really need the Fire Sale. They don't tempo up minions that much because you're so likely to have Brain Freezes, First Flames, ways to clear the board whilst progressing your quest. RDU says, screw all of that. I'm going Tempo King, throwing minions onto the board. And he's rewarded with incredible amounts of damage. This game, especially with the pickup of field contact, is going fantastic.
Answer me now. Lethal? Question mark?
No board space. I think even if they're...
He can fling us his minions.
He can. Even if it was an empty board here, I'm going to say still too many cards in deck. Like, you can set up, I think, quite handsomely for a turn 7 lethal. Again, the board space does become a little bit of a concern.
I'm just kind of wondering whether you just hero power Dagger's face and passes, because either his board gets cleaned up so he pops off next turn, or his board doesn't get cleaned up so he just hits Viper again. Like, seems like a win-win.
No, I agree. If he had one more board space, he could theoretically go like field contact, shoot your own Thalnos, bounce something, bounce it back.
What if he Shadow Steps a Neophyte this turn? I wouldn't hate that, because does he really need this Shadow Step at this point? 20 health on Viper? Does he need a Shadow Step? I don't think so. I like the replay, though. Oh, okay.
Holding it for the field contact turn. That's very interesting, because obviously he doesn't need the Shadow Step for the combo, nor does he necessarily need it to bounce the field contact. But I was wondering if he might want it for the Octobot on the following turn, because he can play the field contact, draw a bunch of cards, replay the Octobot to then discount all the cards he drew during the turn, and then maybe continue the combo. But going for it here, it does carry a lot of merit. If it delays your opponent's quest by 1 turn, that's, a whole extra turn you have to do your own win condition, which makes up for the fact that you're doing a smaller combo turn.
And 1 turn feels like an eternity right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a flow, but again, if he flows, he's taking more damage, and it's kind of one of those weird D6 Warlock problems of old now, where the more damage you take, the less work your opponent has to even do with their combo to win the game, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough. Flow's super important, but can he afford to in this scenario? Does that barrier and flurry? Now 2 flurries. Okay, he could double flurry flow. That's something I don't want to say fast 3 times.
Yeah, he can go flurry, hot streak, and then barrier and complete the quest, right? But it looks like he's holding off for a turn. I guess you want to get use out of the hot streak rather than just playing it as a quest activator.
So now there is no reason whatsoever for RDU to attack with these minions.
Yes.
Just got to plan out, make sure he's got the board space for this. He does have Penflinger to kill off a minion, but obviously that replaces the minion. He does have Brain Freeze to then bounce the Penflinger back, so then he's actually gained 1 board space.
Yeah, he's starting to spend quite a lot of mana this way without discounting much, but you are right. Like, he could go Orc Merchant on his own Octobot here. He kind of wants to save those for the full combo turn, whenever that may come now. So sure, yeah, this is still all good. You can end with the Swindle as well.
Oh, he's going to use the pen. I wondered whether he wanted to Swindle first and then proc the Octo. Now he can't proc the Octo. Now he has to Swindle second. I guess, okay.
Yeah, I think this is fine. He has plenty enough mana the next turn. That's not really his concern. He's got 8 mana available. Plus the preps, if he's playing those as well.
He's playing 1 prep and he used it, right? Didn't he start the game?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I guess it does start to get a little bit tight, given that we've seen both the Octobots already come down as well.
It's why I was surprised that he ended up swindling after the Octo proc, which I might not have been, I'm not saying right or wrong, but I was trying to look at if he could swindle, then proc the Octo to get the discounts on the 2 cards. Because you're really expecting and looking for the Garrotes at that point, right?
I mean, one pressing concern isn't just obviously the combo potential, it's actually this board that Viper is facing down, which he can clear off a bit of the damage, with double first flame, second flame, and then Runed Orb, I suppose, to clear off all the 3 attack minions.
A whole quest chain to do before he can even choose to spend 5 mana on Dawn Grasp.
Time runs out on me.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
These neophytes, plus the lack of Incanter's flow, have been an absolute nightmare for Viper.
All right, Varden obviously playable on the following turn with shoot, flurry.
My hand is too full.
Doesn't really matter which you hit, but losing the Shadow Step for RDU, it's kind of actually the worst card he could overdraw, because by bouncing the Octobot, it would have been the easiest combo in the world. Now with
it's quiet.
Field Contact, double proc, you can draw. I still think it still gets there.
Yeah,
I think
he's got 2
just
spell
enough.
damage. He's got 1 Garrote in hand for 1 mana, and he has a good chunk of ways still at 0 to proc the draws. Like, he goes Garrote now. He's got the 0 cost 1 Thief. He's got the Brain Freeze.
Exactly enough mana to be able to do it, because he's going to have to draw a couple more cards here and then play the extra Garrote, draw an extra card. Yeah,
He's got 2 mana, 0 mana, or 2 mana, 1 mana, right? Still.
Yeah.
Yep. So he goes Garrote now. That's more than enough to get the job done.
Nicely done. Very nicely done by RDU. Again, it's so interesting to see how this Garrote Rogue is played by different players, because I think a lot of players, myself included, would have gone for the more standard play of Step and Octobot or Step of Field Contact. But RDU's decision to go for the Field Contact, again, I wonder if he was so far ahead at that point that it wasn't even necessary. And like Shadow Step in the Octobot, I'm trying to think if anything could have gone wrong, because even burning the Shadow Step, as I said, which like, I mean, aside from Garrot, I suppose was the worst card he could overdraw, that might have then really put a damper on it. Putting himself to 10 cards was probably the mistake with his plan. But outside of that, it probably was just fine Shadow Stepping the Neophyte. It did delay Viper, so even if he has the nuttiest hand in the world, he still can't play everything.
And I think these turns you're seeing right now are the key. Like, I'm sure everyone who plays this deck could polish up a little bit, right? I think that's very fair to say. I don't think anyone's quite got it nailed perfectly yet on a game-by-game basis, but I think all the early damage RDU managed to push made the combo so much easier to do that I think it was fair for RDU to say, oh, I can actually just make Viper's turns worse with this Shadow Step, with these options, with these turns, as opposed to trying to do, like, 40 million damage to Viper when he only had 20 health, right? Like, as long as he can just guarantee the Garrotes actually go off, then he should have been fine. So he's going to take the victory there and only needs to take a win now with his handlock against Viper's whole lineup that he's got available to him now. And he is going to be queuing this Warlock straight into the Mage from Viper once again. So a bit of a tricky matchup as far as I'm concerned for the Warlock, Derek.
It is a bit of a tough one, and I gotta say, I mean nothing against Viper by this, but I do hope RDU wins here, purely because I kind of want Sottle to pass over the quickest day of casting ever in Europe Grandmasters. Having a 3-0 in the previous series and a 3-0 this series, that would bring me a great amount of personal satisfaction, even if there's a certain degree of schadenfreude that I'm deriving from that. But either way, as you said, RDU with the handlock versus Warlock, I think this is a matchup specifically where the nerf from 9 to 10, you really feel it in this one. Because as you so perfectly laid out in the previous series, one turn absolutely feels like an eternity in this combo-based meta. Like, if you can stop your opponent, if they have to play Varden on 7 instead of 6, that's maybe one more turn where you can play the Battle Master, burst them down, and win the game. It's such discrete differences in when you hit your timings on the big plays. And for RDU, while the nerf to Flesh Giant obviously does hamper your ability to get online quickly, Backfire plus a Netheron is an alternate way to get a lot of pressure online right at the start of the game, with a null.
And for me, the raised deads is so important, because the way I've won or lost this matchup, basically won as the Warlock, lost as the Mage, is not when they drop their wave of threats. It's when you clear them or freeze them or whatever, kill them, then they do it again, and then there's like a third level or wave of threats. Suddenly, like, well, I've used my flurries, I've used Brain Freeze, I've used, first, second flame, or Fireball, and I don't have enough cards left to deal with this wave. Or I do, and my quest is like still at tier 1 or tier 2 because I've been having to do repeat casts of certain schools of magic. So I think that's the big trick here, at least in general, is for the Warlock, RDU in this instance, to just keep the multiple waves of threats one after the other. Even if that comes down on turn 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 8, like whatever it is, as long as he can just keep the waves up and not give Viper like a free turn to just solely focus on his quest, or an easy turn to play Dawn Grasp and not feel threatened.
Such an interesting early game here from RDU. With when you're on the coin, you have both the Netheron and the Null. The most common play is tap, a Netheron, tap, Null, both for 1 mana on turn 4. But by going for Null on 3 and then going for the Backfire and Netheron on 4, in a way it applies a bit more pressure earlier on because it gets a 5-cost minion online a 5-attack minion online 1 turn earlier, sorry. But it then also gives a Viper an extra turn to target a minion with his spells. It means he's tapping a little bit less. It's a very interesting balance that he's striking here by going for the less conventional way I've seen it played of just tapping every turn.
And it might be a bit of a problem because it's resulted in a more staggered approach from RDU, which is exactly what you would want to deal with as Mage, right? You want to go, okay, deal with this one thing, they play something, okay, now I can move through the schools of magic dealing with this one thing, and keep going like that. Whereas normally, because the AoE is like the weak side of Quest Mage at the moment, it's more important to go a little bit wider on the board.
Very, very interesting. I mean, now obviously the follow-up is looking fantastic for RDU because he has Raised Dead Flesh Giant at the very least on the following turn. Whether or not Viper goes with the ping here, he does decide to ping to kill off the minion, which is pretty good for RDU because he gets a better Raised Dead.
Can he actually Raised Dead Null Neophyte?
Interesting. I mean, he can, yeah. He can like Raised Dead Null tap Neophyte. Like he's got plenty of ways to spend his mana.
Again, I'm just trying to wonder if going just a little bit wider and putting a Neophyte down is worth a little bit more than just playing a Flesh Giant on this board. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah, I think I usually prefer the ordering of threats first, Neophyte after. Okay. Because a lot of the time at this position in the game, Viper will try and go for... You know, he's already used a couple of freeze effects. You have to ignore the Giants for one turn and then hope to recoup the tempo afterwards. And that's where Neophyte can come in pretty clutch. Obviously, he has the Cone of Cold that he generated here, which is absolutely insane.
I've heard.
Yeah, exactly, against RDU's board. So that kind of flies out the window. But I do like this ordering from RDU just to get the biggest threats online as quick as possible.
And he does have a refill.
Wow.
Gotta be second.
What do you
cone,
even
right?
pick?
I think I want Cone.
I mean, he's just got lethal without even completing the quest in a couple turns. Like, Hot Streak, Fireball, Rundorf. It's so much damage. You're probably right. You're probably right. I want to pick the Fireball.
I don't like being the sensible one.
Yeah.
I just feel like this makes sure he has lethal in 3 turns, if you know what I mean, as opposed to 2. Just having the cone, so he's under literally 0 threat for the next few turns. I do like where your head's at, though.
Yeah. It's a close one. I do think it's a close one. It's almost certainly correct to go with the Cone of Cold for more delay and then complete the quest and go for it afterwards. But either way, still the pressure coming in quick here for RDU. He's got all that pressure on the board, and now the Neophyte comes down. This is why I like it. Even with the freeze in play, it means there's still the threats on board, and now the Umbrella comes down to protect them in the form of Cult Neophyte to make it that little bit harder to survive an extra turn.
Tricky turn, but I actually think I like Cone and Flow this turn, you know.
I wonder.
Ooh, you're tanking 8 with that line. I'm not saying that's wrong necessarily. It's tempting.
In some descriptions, you also gain 15 mana.
when you put it like that.
There you go, see?
What to do?
Just the car salesman of Hearthstone. It's like...
Yeah, maybe you're right. He still has a barrier in play, so he's...
Yeah, so the barrier gets soaked, basically, and you sort of... I just think, like, with what he has in hand, he's got the cram session there as well, that maybe the double reduction, effectively, once this Neophyte effect is gone, would be huge, and he can just burst him out of nowhere. He has Fire and Arcane left, so it would also proc the Arcane. He has Hot Streak next turn to proc Dawngrasp for Fire, play Dawngrasp, and then follow up.
Pretty good, isn't it? You're going to need a big pop-off turn with the cram session, very likely next turn. I also like that he's making the choice to kill off a Netheron instead of freezing the Giant. One Raised Dead has been played. I don't think you can really play around things like that anymore because he's under a lot of pressure.
RDU has kind of one of those nothing hands right now, doesn't he? It's just it's a lot of good cards, but not against Mage. Draw.
Well, one more tap, and he can play a 1-mana Baron Scavenger. So Thalnos tap Giant Scavenger looks pretty powerful to me. It's basically saying, I will kill you next turn. There's nothing you can do about it.
Interesting. I was looking at tap Bristleback the Null and then Giant to be a little bit more defensive health-wise, but as you said, this is a lot of aggression and we'll just basically say you have to work miracles, or realistically Vibe has to win the game this turn, or it's going to be over.
Okay, not a bad top deck. But here we go. It's going to be the Hot Streak, it's going to be Varden, and then I think realistically it's going to be that Cram session. All of a sudden, with the possibility for Fire Sale being one of the best draws in order to blow up this board, Viper's looking like he's in a pretty good spot to clear this up.
Barrier as well?
Yeah, I think he may have just crossed the threshold.
Zero mana Ignite, 0 mana Fire Sale, okay.
Is it just lethal instead? Like, forget about going
Oh yeah,
for...
because it's still 0, right? I was thinking it was the Hot Streak, but it's not. He drew it after the flow, so yeah. Wow. A ton of damage and a really good setup for Viper, I think. Had a good eye for what he needed to achieve that game. RDU put on all the pressure he could, of course, on that turn. Did have other options, but I think going that wide and saying you're not going to proc Varden, well, yeah, kind of right, Dawngrasp, play it and kill me in the same turn. I think that is a fair expectation from RDU, but again, with double flow, all things are possible, as Viper does manage to fight back. Unfortunately, Derek, you don't get your wish. You can't laugh at Sottle. Well, you can laugh at Sottle anyway if you want, I give you permission, but just not for this thing. But a good win there for Viper, and maybe the road to recovery for this series.
Maybe. I'm not going to get my head ahead of ourselves quite yet here, because he does still have against the Handlock Shaman and Demon Hunter. The variant of Demon Hunter that he is playing is, I apologize, the Fell Demon Hunter, which, contrary to what we've seen today, I don't think is the best of matchups up against Handlock, so I'm still putting RDU in a very strong position. But if nothing else, Bunny Hopper's dominant display in the previous series versus Tice shows us how you can do it. It's far from an unwinnable matchup.
Yeah, and I'm just going to check what is going to be in. Yeah, it's going to be the Shaman next, right? So again, this Shaman from Viper is pretty much the most standard list I think I've ever seen Viper submit to anything. Normally there's some spice in there, but I do feel like Shaman right now, it's hard to choose a different direction. It's hard not to value these 30 cards more or less. Some players... don't play an Overdraft, but play another Zapper. I don't know what new things you could put in the deck outside of what exactly an Earth Elemental that would really change it up, or you could feel at least confident about saying would improve the list. So yeah, I think it's fair enough here. We're going to see pretty standard Shaman go up against this Handlock from RDU.
Yeah, we saw Tiz, I believe, today in APAC bringing double Cult Neophyte in Shaman, which is something I've been actually thinking about for a while, and I just kind of assumed that it was the kind of thing that people would have tested and concluded that it didn't quite fit. Maybe that is the case, and Tiz is just ignoring them and doing it anyway. But it's the kind of thing that can help in the combo matchups specifically.
Yeah, I think if anyone puts Cult Neophyte in any list, I'd never really argue with them that much, because it's just good. Right, it just gets a good job done. Even if it just slightly delays one turn in the game, that one turn can be a big deal. But already we are diving in, of course, game number 4. What does Viper have to do here, Derek? What's the general goal of the Quest Shaman in this matchup?
Well, you can go for the game plan of throwing everything you can onto the board and hoping that something sticks and kill them with it. Solrend puts pretty quick work to anything you can develop in the starting turns with no Divine Shield, with basically nothing above 5 health unless you're running Earth Elemental. That rarely works. So definitely the preferred game plan, in my opinion, is to try and complete the quest as quickly as possible. Viper, admittedly, here is kind of doing both at the same time. This is a pretty good starting hand for him to be able to put threats and keep that quest ticking. But realistically, we're going to need a fair bit more value off this Primal Dungeoneer. Obviously, if it can draw you a nature spell and get Canal Slogger, that's great. But Guidance as well is one of the premium ways to keep that quest rolling, so that you can try and get Brucan down before they have an unbeatable board.
Pretty big deal there. I believe Tamsin, Thalnos, and Netheron were discarded or burnt from the Solrend. So, just to keep an eye on there. No Tamsin shenanigans a little bit later on for heal, because especially against Shaman, those drained souls and touches kill minions pretty consistently. Yeah, Viper can go Feral Spirit. He did get rewarded from the Note Taker, right? Just playing it out, and again, very killable on the Warlock side a lot of the time, but didn't die. got that extra feral spirit and is going to continue progressing this quest.
Yeah, I think if it was possible to be killed, it probably would have been. You'd
Yeah.
probably expend a Drain Soul or an Unstable Shadow Blast. But I agree, his hand was telling him to do it, and you have to listen to what the heart of the cards tells you.
No one but me.
Okay, this is pretty rapid. He's getting through his quest here. He's got everything to do at least level 2 and halfway through to the 3rd level of Brukan.
I actually like Zappa this turn, you know. You've just seen
Really?
Soulrend. You didn't see an answer to Note Taker. Like, there's nothing else. He doesn't have any. He doesn't have like Bloom, right? So he doesn't need to reduce any big mana turns. Like everything's one that he can
Right.
the final stage of the quest with.
I mean, the problem is that for me, this is one of those rare hands from Shaman that can actually fairly efficiently answer Giants or
yeah.
other big minions, right? Like you have Novice Zapper, Lightning Bolt, Perpetual Flame. Your opponent has discarded a Netheron, which obviously makes you less afraid of big threats coming down. I honestly don't know. It's a real branching path, a real fork in the road for the game plan, because you can just tempo out this Zapper. If it gets Touch of the Nathrazim'd, it's pretty bad for you. All of a sudden, your clear potential is massively dampened.
That's true. Viper is going to pressure on board, though, and it is going to get answered, or at least Bardu has the option to answer it. We'll see what he does. I'd be shocked if he didn't kill the spell damage minion. Like I said, I do get this approach from Viper because he's seen a Soul Rend. He's not seen much spot removal being used when it could have been used. So why not go for it? We do see now, though, that the one difficult thing with that sort of general Hearthstone approach to your opponent's potential hand is that Warlock draws a ton of cards. So although they might not have something one turn, they've probably drawn about 4 or 5 cards in the meantime. So.
And yeah, really now for RDU, as long as he doesn't discard his Baron Scavengers, he's already approaching the phase of the game that Shaman can't keep up with. If he goes for another Soul Rend here, which I'm somewhat expecting, plus probably a tap, he can then go Giant on the following turn, find those Baron Scavengers, and it will be very, very difficult for Viper to keep up.
I'm going to go a bit of a different direction using this removal, progressing his quest, getting that Giant down quite low.
Yeah.
I was even looking at a bit of a weird one, but I don't think it would have got the Giant active, I'm pretty sure, of just like Soul Rending only 2 minions, because he's so close to the point of 10. He didn't have anything to play when he hit 10 this turn anyway, so I was just wondering if he could like Soul Rend a little bit and just use the Bolt elsewhere, but...
Oh, just a little Soul Rend, just a little taste. All right, 1 out of 3, which does allow for quest completion, Brukan in hand this turn. But obviously the monstrous amount of overload that would entail means that it's not playable on the following turn.
Is there any other option though, Derek?
Fireheart? I mean, if you just get yourself a bunch of value generation... Because realistically, like if you go trade Lightning Bolt, Perpetual Flame, I suppose you're only using 1 burst spell in all of that, but it doesn't feel great in terms of not sending this burn damage face. Like at the moment, I'm thinking get Brukan online and launch this all face, and maybe Instructor Fireheart allows you to get a little bit more of the way towards completing the quest. Close.
Excuse me. I wonder if Viper decides that he needs the plan to actually, 1, not die, which he gets to do this turn, and then get Brukan down, and Fireheart is the answer after the Brukan, right? To try and pressure and finish out the game.
Okay. Gets a big minion, at least. The kind of minion that synergizes very nicely with, say, a Wind Fury off of this Instructor Fireheart. And because he's used essentially all of his removal with Drain Souls, Touch of the Nathrazim coming down, both Unstable Shadow Blast last turn, and no Tamsin available, it's pretty tough for RDU to actually answer this.
Yeah, he can answer the first half right if he goes Soul Rend, Touch, Coil.
Right, and then
just hope that the low roll happens.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't really see much else. He can't even get to, without like creating a coil somewhere, he can't even get to the 10 cards, right? Unless he Soul Rends, I mean.
Yeah, this is probably the avenue I like going down and just bristle back to kill off the final half. You probably then finish up with Raise Dead just because there's a chance to hit Flesh Giant, which would be instantly playable.
I don't think RDU's too scared about dropping down to 25. There's a Flesh Giant.
Sorry. It's guaranteed. How is that the only minion that's died with 10 cards left in deck? That's crazy.
Just get to clear the board, though, and honestly, board clear's all he really needs for now, because it'll proc Brukan, right?
It will.
Then he can play it next turn, then he has Fireheart to, plus, a draw or so in that amount of time to go off. I like it.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there is the board clear, absolutely. I wonder if you ever launch that 5 damage face. Like, you go Serpent Shrine, play the Brukan, and then maybe hope to get there by like going Lightning Bolt face and then Fireheart delivering you lethal.
The problem is if you don't kill the 3/3, right? Like, that's just removes a Lightning Bolt to an extent from the equation anyway.
I mean, you could portal that and then send your
push fire
taunt face, but I mean, I'm kind of just spitballing here because realistically, the kind of the underpinnings of my reasoning for this is I feel like Viper is slowly losing this game. He's already used a charged call. Brukan kind of needs a miracle to work alongside it, and maybe Fireheart does provide him that. I'm maybe underestimating the power of it being an APAC caster, but here in EU, maybe it can get the job done.
I also think there's a certain... Oh, okay, that helps. There's a certain element of, like, even the Brukan next turn might not die, right? It is a 7/7. You need a lot of removal being used.
Oh, there
now here come the minions, Dara. These are what you were waiting for.
Double Scavenger positioned with Neophyte in the middle. Okay, I don't like that because you could go for Neophyte in the middle and then wriggle it across, but it's still lethal either way. If they just play Brukan, you win the game here. And that's likely what Viper will do.
Yeah, he almost just can't not, right? With only 2 cards and 3 on the draw for RDU. I think if he doesn't play Brukan, then he has to play Fireheart, and then suddenly Brukan becomes just a 7/7 because he has to just draw off the top and hope for the best. But we can see Battleground, Battle Master, the terror of the meta. Or at least used to be, not so much now, but still. Pretty strong. RDU takes the victory 3-1 over Viper. Not quite the 3-0 sweep you were after, Daruk, but still pretty good and swift win for RDU. And he's getting back on track, RDU, with a good couple of results now. And moving on to tomorrow into top 4.
Yeah, I thought it was very clean play from RDU. Clearly the kind of plays that show understanding both of his deck and the way you play them into other matchups. I think the last game was a little interesting as to how he used the Soul Rend, but it was probably correct the way he went about it, just to make sure you don't burn your threats at the end because it was running a little bit light on value. Viper, of course, I 100% agree with just going for Brukan there and praying they don't have the Battle Master. Alone, the Instructor Fireheart can just win you the game next turn if you truly believe in it. But there we go, RDU versus Viper. An unfortunate loss for Viper, but still okay, right? With his second place after week 1, he's still in a reasonable spot in the points table.
And we might even have an old school top 4